and Innovations. I'm delighted to be here with you. I'm also overwhelmed with the response we have received. Once again, I want to welcome you all. I will have time to meet you individually. My apologies for the size of the room. I know some distinguished delegates have to sit in the back in the second and third row. My sincere apology. It is good to be with you, and we have a very interesting 2 days planned. The purpose of this meeting is to bring leaders of innovations from all over the world together to really explore possibilities for collaborations, to learn from each other, and to really get to know each other. The real idea is to leverage our talents and help design better world for a large number of people. I hope in the next 2 years, 2 days rather, we will get to know each other little better, and if possible, see if we could make this a regular event going forward. In India, government decided to make the decade of 2010-2020 as the decade of innovation. Based on that, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh set up a National Innovation Council to help prepare a roadmap for the decade of innovation. We have 17 members in the council. We meet on a regular basis. And we collectively decided to focus on 5 key areas. 1, innovation as a platform. So it goes beyond science and technology and laboratories into innovations in governance, education, health, social sector, and many other areas. So it cuts across horizontally as opposed to focusing on a few verticals. We also realized that in India we need to focus on inclusive growth-based innovations. Innovations for the bottom of the pyramid, to do more for less, to focus on affordability, scalability, sustainability. To do all of these things, we need to create proper ecosystem, risk capital, understanding of intellectual property, interactions between industry, university, government, right kind of policy framework. We've also defined some key drivers for innovations. And finally, we want a great deal of debate and discourse on innovation. We've been around for a year, and in the process, we have learned a great deal from each other. Some of us very strongly believe that best brains in the world have been busy solving problems of the rich, who really don't have problems to solve. And as a result, problems of the poor really don't get the right kind of talent. We have the largest number of poor. We have great potential for talent. So we see this as a moral responsibility to really focus on the problems of the poor. A couple of months ago, I was with Simon Perez, and he said, Sam, the big conflict in the Arab world is all about poverty. He said, of course, it manifests in many different ways. But if we can come up with a good program to address poverty, bring innovations, we can probably ease tension. I could say same thing for many areas in India. Our challenge is essentially bridging that disparity between rich and poor, urban, rural, educated, uneducated. We also have 550 million young below age of 25. And that is a major challenge for us in terms of their jobs, their prosperity, their education, and all of that. So to us, the real challenge for innovations lie in finding new ways for productivity, efficiency in agriculture, energy, education, health, and many other related areas. We need radical change, massive change, and not just incremental change. And that's where innovation is going to come in handy. We are a nation of a connected billion now. 20 years ago, we had just 2 million phones for 750 million people. Now we have 900 million phones, and we are a nation of connected 1.2 billion. So the key is, how do we use this connectivity to go to the next stage? And we are collectively focused on broadband, knowledge networks, connecting our local governments. Again, all of these things would require innovative mindset. We see a lot of opportunities together in sharing talent with the rest of the world, learning from them through knowledge network and through these kinds of interactions. We are also conscious of the fact that this would require capital. So we are planning to set up $1 billion fund to really feed innovations at the bottom of the pyramid. We are looking at industry clusters to see how we can create ecosystem to focus on innovations at clusters. We have about 150 industry clusters for diamond, leather, machine tools, textile. In each of these clusters, we need innovation toolkit, incubators, interactions between industry and universities, with our scientific laboratories. And we want to share with you some of these things and also learn from you, because many of you have a lot more experiences with clusters than we have had. We also need to communicate to a large number of people that this effort needs everyone to join in. 17 people at the national level can't do much. We could probably be cheerleaders. But we need people in every state, people in every university, people in every industry segment to really join hands to think about innovations in a very different way. At the end of the day, we see next 10 years as the key window of opportunity for us to begin to redesign many systems in India. Not just IT, but biotech, nanotech, genetics, and many other related technologies, materials, alternate energies, offer a great deal of hope. This will require partnership with all of you. I don't look at innovation just for global competitiveness. We need innovations to create new jobs, for global growth, and to create better opportunities for a large number of people, especially at the bottom of the pyramid. Today there are new networks of people, networks of talent, networks of ideas, and we need to tap into these networks. And the purpose today is to really start that dialogue. I know there will be a little bit chaotic because we have lots of people here with lots of things to say, and we have very little time. So we'll have to be strict about time management, which is not easy, because if you are given 5 or 7 minutes to say what you are doing and what you have done for 30, 40, 50 years, it's not easy. I wish each one of us had an hour to talk. But the idea today is to just get the ball rolling and not cover all the grounds. So if you get hassled a little bit about schedule, please bear with us. We want to be nice, but at the same time, we may have to be nasty. Help us in keeping track of the schedule. We have many distinguished guests here. It'll be hard to introduce everybody. But at the head of the table, we have innovation leaders from almost 14, 15 countries. I want to once again welcome them. And when they have their opportunity to talk, maybe they can just quickly introduce themselves rather than my taking time out and then again spending time to introduce. So we have a quick program outlined in front of you. This session will be over at 11:30. We have about 2 hours. And I overruled distributing coffee and tea and crackers in the middle. They were all set. I said, no disturbance. So if you need coffee or tea, it's available outside. Just walk out. It's there. But rather than 10 fellows serving us, I thought it'll be distracting. So bear with us. We want your focus here. So with this brief introduction, once again, I want to welcome you. Once again, I want to re-emphasize that our goal is to focus on bottom of the pyramid, inclusive growth, new ways of looking at the challenges, collaborating with the world, and really helping to innovate to create better world for all our people. Thank you. I'm going to now request Honorable Minister for Science and Universities, Mr. David Willets, to say a few words, and then we'll go through the sort of program. You have program in front of you, so rather than my intervening, you can just pick up the ball. So next would be Eric Besson. No, I don't think he's here. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And then Anish, and the sequence is already laid out here, so just follow this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sam, and thank you for inviting us all here today. You have already created in this room your very own innovation cluster, and our challenge is to deliver on the very important topics you've set for us. Very briefly, for me as Minister for Universities and Science in the British Cabinet, let me just describe our approach and some of the challenges. We have, as you rightly call it, an ecosystem. In Britain, at the heart of it are our universities. We have roughly in Britain 4% of the world's researchers, but they produce 14% of the world's most cited articles. And as well as being places for research, there is clear evidence in the UK that the more graduates you have, the more innovative you are. Our most innovative companies are the ones that also have disproportionately high levels of graduate employment. We fund our research activity mainly through our research councils within a ring-fenced science and research budget of £4.6 billion. And these research councils cover the whole range of disciplines. Sometimes people think that innovation is going to come from some specific branch of the physical sciences. We see one of the strengths of our system is that we have, as well as physical scientists, we have social scientists, we have people in the arts and humanities, and they all contribute. I guess historically one of our weaknesses in Britain is that we've not always been as good at applying our discoveries as we have been in first making them, which is why the previous government created a new body, the Technology Strategy Board, which in our new government we have been very happy to sustain and stick with, whose task is to carry the innovation, to move further down the innovation pipeline and help finance projects closer to commercialization. And Ian Gray, the director of the Technology Strategy Board, is one of the members of my delegation here today. And we have, despite public spending being so tight, we have allocated an extra £200 million for the Technology Strategy Board to create a network of technology innovation centres, rather modelled on German Fraunhofer institutes. As a case study in what we're trying to do, we're very proud of a discovery that won the Nobel Prize, two scientists in Manchester, of graphene. They conducted their original scientific research in a very typically British way. They had a block of graphite and sticky tape. And they put sticky tape on the graphite to take some of the graphite off. Then they put sticky tape on the sticky tape. And eventually they had graphene 1 atom thick, literally originally done by using sticky tape and a block of graphite. They've then been investigating the properties of this substance, 1 atom thick, and we've just allocated £50 million for the investigation of various applications of graphene, working closely with businesses. The challenges that we have in our policy agenda, I think something that we might discuss around the table. Venture capital has classically played a crucial role in innovation. The venture capital finance model has suffered very badly from the financial crisis of the past few years. Can we really expect it to go back to playing the role it did 5 years ago? And to what extent are venture capitalists looking for public support to take products closer to commercialization before they invest? Secondly, public procurement. The British government has been described as the missing consumer of its own research. To what extent can we use public procurement to drive innovation? We're also very interested in Britain in learning from the inducement prizes. We have a history of this. We had a prize for the first person who could help our seafaring ships measure longitude in the 18th century. We had the Schneider Trophy driving the advances in airplane technology early in the 20th century. We look at the American flourishing of prizes at the moment. To what extent can inducement prizes drive innovation? A few other quick observations. We think it's very important that nobody imagines anymore that innovation just happens in one country. And it's clear to us when we measure the performance of our researchers, the most productive researchers are the ones who have done their research in more than one country. And the most cited articles are the articles that have authors from more than one country. So we're very keen on international collaboration. And if I may say so, there's no country with whom we would rather collaborate than our friends in India. We already have £80 million of joint research funding between Britain and India, and are very keen to take that further. One of the reasons why David Cameron had as his first major overseas visit, he brought a group of us with him to India, and we have been very closely engaged with our friends in India. And finally, Sam, as you rightly said, the purpose of this innovation is not ultimately to celebrate the achievements of researchers or the profits and success of businesses. The ultimate purpose of innovation is to serve the interests of all of our citizens. And the good news is that the economic analysis suggests ultimately consumers capture most of the gains from innovation. One estimate we've had from one group of economists is that 98% of the economic value created by the big advances in digital and IT have been caught by consumers enjoying a greater range of higher quality products. So it is the consumer that ultimately matters, and it's very important, of course, that that includes consumers with very low incomes indeed. We think that we do indeed need to rise to the challenge of doing more here. In areas like medical research, it's very important that publicly funded research sponsors research perhaps into diseases in the less affluent parts of the world that are not necessarily the priorities for the commercial drug companies. We're very proud of our collaboration with soil scientists and geneticists in India as we look at the breeding of crops that might help in developing countries, drought-resistant wheat, rice resistant to saltwater flooding. Recent advances we've announced in Britain only in the last couple of weeks in understanding from the Sanger Institute, understanding malaria. So we have an obligation to ensure that our innovation and research activities spread widely like that, but they spread widely in other ways. Even if there's one technological sector that we think we understand, you soon find the gains are captured in completely different business sectors, and that's very important. And sometimes it's the low-income consumers who drive the innovation that the rest of us can learn from. Telemedicine, the use of the mobile phone as a medical device and for transmitting medical information. They're probably more advanced in East Africa in using the mobile phone as a medical delivery device than anywhere else in the world, because they haven't necessarily got the same kind of infrastructure as in our most advanced nations. So we believe there are enormous opportunities to spread innovation to people with low incomes and to draw on their own experiences in driving innovation in the future. In politics, we sometimes exaggerate what we can do in the short run, but underestimate the significance of our decisions for the long run. And when we look at the long-term effects of some of the general purpose technologies that have already been developed, we see how much can happen, and I'm confident that even more will be happening in the future, not least because of events like this. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. May I request Nicolas Princeton from France?
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for inviting me. I'm here replacing Ministre Éric Besson. I'm an advisor to President Sarkozy in charge of new media and information technology. So thanks to you all. It's a real honor to be here and to share with you. A few quick remarks. I had a speech written, but I think it's not good. A few remarks will be much better. First, to take a step back, one thing we're trying to analyze, to pick up from, to build an innovation strategy is a reflection on change. And one of the biggest changes that's happening right now, and with which we are trying to cope with and understand better and leverage, is the shift of power from large institutions, such as governments, to individuals, small groups, and the private sector. And from that, thinking about the role of government, we are trying to think of how to understand the shift from a form of, vertical command of power to the horizontal spread of power and influence. So talking about the role of government in this innovation space, we're trying to think of government as one actor, one entity, among others, in a global ecosystem of innovation. So it's not looking at the ecosystem for innovation from above. It's really thinking at how government can be in the middle, trying to fuel innovation. And so with regards to investment, for example, to see government as an ecosystem investor and not just some kind of superior authority that's going to decide everything. To take a few examples, I think one of the key issues and challenges we have in France we've been working on for the past 4 years, and I think one of the strongest reforms of President Sarkozy has been to liberate and leverage the power of universities. Universities used to be very centralized in France. They are now decentralized and, as we say, autonomous. So that will enable us to put universities in the middle of the ecosystem for innovation and do, like it's the case in many other countries already. But we have seen a very fast change in the way universities work in our countries, and these past 2 years, the huge dynamics and the leverage brought from French universities has been amazing. And the investment from the government side has been one of over €5 billion, in the past 3 years. The second point I wanted to make is about the importance, and I'm with Minister Willits on this, of venture capital. That's a very strong challenge because we've been investing a lot, and there's been a huge effort on the part of France in investing in notably the digital economy, over 400 million euros invested, and another 400 million euros invested in seed investment, which is pretty rare, but that was kind of the missing spot in the investment channel in our country with regards to startups mainly. The question is now, it's not the amount of money that's invested, is the efficiency of this investment. Most of our countries don't have maybe the experience Silicon Valley has in terms of investing in technology, for example, and the quality of the venture capital, the quality of the advice that's brought by people who have been doing venture capital for 50 years, obviously has to be, I guess, better than one that's been working for 20 years. That's, I think, a point we could reflect upon. The third point is also bringing innovation closer to commercialization and trying to leverage our scientific excellence in several domains. I don't know if you know, but France is the country that has the most field medals in mathematics, proportionally to the population. And whenever I go to clusters of innovation around the world, and mostly in Silicon Valley, every time I get into a company, I'm both very proud and, you know, kind of frustrated to see that the CTO very often is a Frenchman. So thinking about how to leverage that excellence, bring it back home or leverage it from abroad, I think is a key point for us. We're investing now over 5 billion euros in new projects such as cloud computing, mobile software, smart grids, all over the place. So it really is an issue of money put in, despite the context you know in Europe. But it really is a question of how you invest it. The fourth point is about our innovation clusters. We launched our innovation clusters over 6 years ago, and we have now more than 35 major innovation clusters around the country. And what's interesting with that is that I think the approach that was taken was really bottom up, so to speak. At some point, government decided to screen the economic landscape of the country and to look at where, you know, bottom up were emerging significant, already non-structured, but already existing clusters. That is, a few innovative companies close to each other with maybe university in the middle or some kind of laboratory for research. And the way that was built really was interesting because I think the money was really well spent growing from this bottom-up approach. The fifth point I want to make, and that's not the last, but the one before last, is the way we try to think about this. I'm an IT guy, and the three key concepts we try to use and mobilize to think about innovation really are words we use all the time in the digital economy space. And those are the words of networks, platforms, and marketplaces. And I think every single domain of innovation we're trying to put up, and President Sarkozy definitely thinks that way, is think about how to bring networks together, how to transform those networks into platforms, or at least bring those networks of people and talent onto platforms. That is a place where they can share, a place where they can remain. Like here, for example, this is a platform you're building. And how to transform that platform into a marketplace. That is to say, a place where people are going to be transactional and a place that's going to go somewhere. And within those platforms and marketplaces, I think the role of the government is to fuel innovation, to try to catalyze the whole system, and also to have a role in terms of checks and balances. The last point I want to make, and I think this is one for the future, and I'd love to hear people around that, is education. I think France is going to be a very interesting country to follow with regards to education, because we're really thinking deep about how to implement technology, and mostly the internet, to fuel education, spread education across the board. And I think one of the key assets we have in this country, in France at least, is a very centralized system, which is kind of counterintuitive and opposed to what I've been saying until now. But the fact that you have a very centralized educational system, I think really is an opportunity to think about the kind of spread of content you can deliver. And I think we're all, I hope, going to be able at some time to ask ourselves the question, once the question of connectivity and access to the network has been dealt with, which is going very fast in many countries, and I think in France it's pretty much done. The digital divide, in a way, is a problem that's being solved right now. Is what kind of content do you want to put in there to create actual value, especially in education? Those were my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. My name is Anish Chopra. I serve as President Obama's Chief Technology Officer. I report directly to the President, and the role that I play for him is to ensure that the advice he gets on any subject, health, energy, manufacturing, etc., is properly informed by the potential of technology, data, and innovation. And it is in that context, Sam, I want to thank you for convening this incredible group, and to express my hope that from this will come a number of initiatives, either bilaterally or collectively, to advance the challenges that we all face at our respective bottom of the, in our case, perhaps it's a diamond in terms of the population size at the bottom, but whatever the number may be, that is a group that occupies a great deal of our time. The President unveiled his innovation strategy 2 years ago, and it had 3 basic elements. It articulated a role for government as investor in what we refer to as the building blocks of innovation. Now, while we have historically invested heavily in university-based research and development, even in this fiscally difficult time, we have prioritized our R&D investments over other public priorities. But the innovation, if you will, that President Obama has brought to the investment spend has been to close what had been seen as a gap from taking inventions in the lab to market. And we have experimented, I guess is a better word than declared victory, but we have launched a series of initiatives, my favorite one being our Innovation Corps program launched by the National Science Foundation, under the principle that every 90 days our investigators should be given the chance to ask for a $50,000 one-time commercialization grant to see if their wacky ideas have the potential to make a difference. And that marrying up these very modest funds with mentorship from venture capital and other stakeholders in the ecosystem. In the grand scheme of the NSF budget, this is very modest, but as a matter of culture, it has had a profound impact. Now you don't wait 1 year for the big solicitation that you dream you can land for a multi-year program. You literally can talk to an entrepreneur, and a professor can come together and say, why don't we in the next 30 days write up a proposal? And every 3 months they are reviewing and offering these spot awards. And they are making decisions on the spot award in 30 days. I mean, this is an unbelievable pace of change. And we've just completed our first round, and now we're keeping that pace up. We also acknowledge that infrastructure is increasingly digital. I think Nicholas did a phenomenal job explaining the power of broadband more generally and mobile broadband more specifically. The President has outlined a pretty ambitious goal to modernize our telecommunications infrastructure to extend it to 98% of the population through mobile broadband. The second role the President identified for us had been in establishing rules of the road that promote innovation. Now, some of that has been calling on the private sector, absent regulation, to do more to promote entrepreneurship. We've launched a collaboration called the Startup America Partnership, where we've galvanized nearly $730 million of private money through a vehicle led by entrepreneurs like Steve Case, 0 taxpayer dollars, and they've established a bold ambition to support 100,000 high-growth entrepreneurs in the next 3 years. And because they are not bound by government rules and regulations in the form of procurement or any other traditional levers, they can move with speed. And they are bringing very creative ideas to supporting those high-growth entrepreneurs. And every day, they are introducing new innovations, the most recent one being establishing, to your point, Sam, local and regional hubs of innovation, promoting high-growth entrepreneurs. But we're also establishing new rules of the road in our capital markets. We haven't yet finished this, but the president called for basically deregulating crowdfunding. The ability for entrepreneurs to attract very small dollars of investment, in aggregate up to $1 million, that in the previous regulatory regime required notifying the Securities and Exchange Commission and ensuring that they had proper oversight. And now literally frameworks that you saw built in Africa and India, Kiva networks, for example, are offering the chance to bring capital to early stage companies in downtown Detroit, where they can raise very modest pools of capital to try relatively simple ideas that have the potential to scale. So we are very pleased that Congress is taking action. We haven't yet finished that process, but we're on our way. But the most important thing that we're doing, in my humble opinion, is concentrating our efforts in the sectors of the economy that we believe are critical for long-term economic growth that have overlap in this bottom of the pyramid discussion, that is achieving lower cost, higher value healthcare, achieving energy efficient systems for energy delivery, to create educational outcomes that have the bold ambition of doubling a high school dropout's income in less than 6 months. These areas are sectors of the U.S. economy that have not historically benefited from our research and development investment. The bottom of the pyramid problems more specifically. And so we have outlined a vision for open innovation where we collaborate. I love Nicholas's vision of the horizontal, where we collaborate with universities, entrepreneurs, policymakers to try to bring new ideas to market in health, energy, and education. And we're using the role of government as impatient convener. David mentioned our inducement prizes that allows us to bring, pay for outcomes models. We now have the legal authority, thanks to the American Competes Act, to bring prizes across every federal agency, and we're putting them to use to bring about some of these breakthroughs. And we are opening up data as an asset. We'll talk more about this, hopefully, throughout the day, but I wanted to give you that brief framework as an appetizer. Thank you.
Dr. Don Russell.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm the Secretary and the head of the Department of Innovation, Industry, Science and Research in Australia. I thought I might just give you a brief overview of what's been happening in Australia and talk a little bit about collaboration and the importance of global cooperation. But I thought, given the focus of this particular roundtable, it would be interesting to talk about how important it is to maintain the debate, to ensure that we lift what we're all responsible for and get that measure of support that we need from the community, and not only build that support but keep it. Well, look, maybe I need to say just a couple of things about Australia. I mean, we're a sizable economy, big immigrant country, but what's been going on in Australia, which is of interest, I think, is that we are one of the major beneficiaries of the extraordinary growth in the Asia-Pacific region, which has meant that Australia, because of our natural resource endowments, we've been living through an extraordinary period of a mining boom. This has had the consequence of lifting the exchange rate, which has put enormous pressure on manufacturing and anything in the traded goods sector. Now, what this has meant is that the country has had to come to grips with the structural change which has come as a consequence of this. And what we've been quite successful in doing has been convincing people that a key way in which Australia does adjust and does cope with the need to restructure a whole range of Australian industries is through science and research and innovation. And in this way, we've elevated what our responsibilities are to becoming a key part of the economic debate, and that has had great importance for our ability to gain the support of people, but also to gain the extra resources which have been necessary to make this structural change come to pass. But let me just say a few things. I mean, the starting point of all of this was 2008 when we did conduct a major review of the innovation system. This coincided with the change of government. That review led to 72 recommendations. It was a group of economists, academics, researchers and business leaders. We're probably fortunate that we didn't get more recommendations. That led to the government's response in 2009, which was powering ideas. We actually accepted 75% of those recommendations, which were addressed in full or in part, but we did manage to cement 4 themes around the government's response. This was research capacity in schools, business innovation, collaboration and governance. And lying behind this was the notion that 3/4 of the private sector patents actually drew on public research. And in Australia, and I suspect this is true of other countries, innovation really is about encouraging and enabling small to medium-sized companies to actually innovate. But with the governance issue, it says, as I said, it was very important to win the debate and to actually maintain the support. We established as part of that, as that response was a whole set of priorities, which we then identified with targets. And I think one of the key ways in which we've managed to maintain support is that we have committed to producing every year a quite detailed analysis which brings together data not only on what we've been achieving, but putting it into a framework, how we line up with other OECD countries. And the findings of this, we've done 2 of them now, have made it very clear that whereas Australia has a range of successful areas in terms of how we go about innovation, we do have a major deficiency in terms of collaboration. This is extraordinary. I didn't realise I was actually talking to slides. Well, look, this is quite helpful. You're even on the right slide. Look, this is a slide. That comes out of our innovation report, and it's, as you can see, the outside rim is the top 5 OECD countries. The red is the average for the OECD, and the blue is Australia. And you can see that we are quite good in terms of resources. That's R&D and venture. Skills, we're pretty good on skills. Yellow, we have quite an entrepreneurial business framework, but where we fall down, which is the red quadrant there, is on collaboration, and that has a lot of implications for other things we do. We can move on to the next slide. And so this is in terms of outputs. You can see, again, this is the outside of the spider chart there is the top 5 OECD countries. Again, the red is the average for the OECD, and the blue is Australia. These are probably the best proxies in terms of our achievements. Again, you can see we are pretty good at entrepreneurship in terms of skills and publications, whatever, but in terms of the generations of patents and new market products, we fall down there. And it's clear that collaboration and the need to commercialise are the key failings of the system. But in terms of, if we could have the next chart. I find this quite an interesting chart. This is again an OECD chart. It's a simple chart. It's just gross domestic expenditure on R&D to GDP. But if you look through the various countries, I mean, Israel is at the top. I think it's interesting to look at Korea, the OECD average itself, you can see Australia, China and India. But what you'll also see is that whereas the bar is the current ratio for 2008, there's another dot in there which is the ratio in 1999, and you can see that some countries have been quite successful in lifting the ratio of expenditure, and it's those countries which have been able to tell a story about why the country is investing in innovation research, and it's the countries of Korea, China and Israel, and I would say that that's also where Australia is. That research and development and innovation are now seen in Australia and in these other countries as key parts of the economic story. Well, look, just in closing, let me just say that you know, we do have the challenges, as I've mentioned. We talk about the two-speed economy in Australia, but we have linked the problems and the issues of that to innovation and research, which has given us an extra degree of freedom there. And collaboration is seen as a major part in which we can actually change our success story there. And in terms of being able to maintain public support, we have to be able to demonstrate that there is an innovation dividend from public research. And part of that comes from being able to more successfully commercialise that research and build success stories with small and medium-sized enterprises. Thank you.
May I request Petri Peltonen?
Thank you very much, Sam. Colleagues of innovation from India and abroad. I'm Petri Peltonen, and I'm heading the Innovation Policy Department at the Finnish Ministry of the Economy. Well, certainly the word innovation gets a lot of attention these days, not only in Finland, but it's very much relevant in the EU and Indian policy talk, and obviously in the business talk as well. So there's a lot of expectation on innovation. There's not a very precise definition of what is innovation. And I don't have one specific one myself, but certainly it is, in a sense, the process of putting knowledge, skills and creativity into a novel and practical use. So in that sense, though innovation gets to be mentioned often, it's not an objective of its own, but it is very much a means to achieve higher ends, be those ends then competitiveness or renewal in the business sector, creating new companies, new jobs, and in the end of the day then, of course, driving the economic growth and well-being. So in that sense, obviously, the innovation is very much in the focus of any country's economic policy, for example. And it's not really that only a matter of the business sector development, but very much also a way to drive societal renewal and development in the public service. So in that sense, innovation is very much a cross-cutting issue in policy making as well. And of course, the definition or contents of innovation has been broadening. So at least in the Finnish policy making, clearly, we are not only focusing on the scientific or technological innovations, but very much also looking into service innovations, business model innovations, innovations in the social life or in workplace activities. Well, first of all, it's very interesting to follow the very rapid development of the innovation policy here in India, creation of the Innovation Council and declaring the coming years as the decade of innovation, I think are very important steps. And clearly India, if I may say, has got a very strong position for taking one of the places of the leaders of innovation on global terms. The Indian institutions for science, the universities and research organizations are strong and the global scale. And in addition, there is a strong will and desire to put science into use, which I understand is very much the essence of innovation. And certainly then the new features of innovation, where basically the user orientation is taking clearly on board, looking at the base of the pyramid opportunities, I think are very much the new facets of innovation that are not only relevant for India, but I think for all countries and their policies. So those new features like inclusivity, accessibility, sustainability and scalability, I think should be considered in policy making in the area of innovation throughout the world, in the European Union and also in Finland. Well, Finland gets to be mentioned every once in a while as one of the so-called more advanced innovation nations. But if I were to choose one word or one characteristic which would describe the Finnish way of innovation, I would pick up the word partnership. I think that's been very much the focal point in the policy making and in driving the industry-academia collaboration. National, regional, international collaboration, I think, has been very much the cornerstone of Finnish innovation policy and its implementation through Tekes and the Academy of Finland, for example, in their funding schemes and programs. And also the cluster-based development, as was also mentioned by Sam. Though I would say that still the clusters today are very much global, so in that sense, being able to develop policies in at least a small country like Finland that would be today relevant in developing clusters has to be done in international or even global contexts. Well, in Finland we just had an election this spring and the formation of a new government took place in June. And I'm of course proud to say that innovation gets to be mentioned often on the government agenda as well. Actually there's 26 individual mentionings of the word innovation. But the good news is that it's not only mentioned on that sort of a one-page paragraph on innovation policy, but it's very much also seen as a driver in many other policy sectors, be those then economic policy, environmental policy, educational policy. And so in that sense, innovation is very much sort of a cross-cutting issue also in the government agenda, at least in Finland. The government is pushing through a strong university reform also in Finland. The universities have been now, since 2010, been decoupled from the government structures with full financial and administrative position. And actually 2 of the universities are now fully privatized, and they're based on a foundation supported strongly by the industrial investments. We have been renewing our cluster-based policies and created so-called SHOCs, Strategic Centers for Science, Technology and Innovation, where we are trying to really strongly build an international dimension in the cluster-based policies. And thirdly, we are clearly trying to understand and implement the user and demand orientation in the policy making, be that then engaging the users, the consumers in the innovation processes, following the Indian examples on the base of the pyramid thinking, and including the trials on innovative public procurement, as for also in Finland, public procurement is a significant sort of investment by the government. Well, today, of course, colleagues, we all understand that the world of science and innovation, the play field is flat and spiky. So in that sense, really the significance of any borderlines between within science or innovation have lost their meaning. And of course that challenges us national policymakers, especially in small countries. So we have to be and are strongly pushing on collaboration at all levels. And of course I think the essence of innovation is not really done at any sort of a government level. It is really to connect people, it's to connect top researchers, top research organizations, top companies, top locations to work with one another. So in that sense, sort of the playfield today is very global, and it's also a very level playing field, I would claim, today. So innovation has got great opportunities to take place regardless of the location, be that the cold Finland or the hot Delhi. Just briefly on the Finland-India activities, actually my minister, Mr. Häkämies, visited India about a month ago. He met with his Indian counterpart, Science Minister Desmud and Dr. Ramasamy, and we had an excellent discussion, and the level of bilateral activities is around between 10 to 20 billion euros on bilateral activities. But the ministers basically concluded that this is not enough. We should aim for more, and we have actually now initiated this autumn a Finnish Innovation Center concept here in Delhi. It's called FinNode. So it's really the, if I may say, the embassy of the Finnish innovation system here. And in that sense, I think trying to even build stronger linkages between the best of Finland and the best of India in the area of research and innovation and science. But just to conclude, let me just recall one issue which actually took place in the inauguration ceremony of the Finnode Center. Actually, we had the pleasure of having as one of the keynote speakers there Dr. Sibal, the Indian Minister for Information Technology. And actually in his opening remarks actually quite diligently challenged all of us, most importantly, to innovate in the way we think. Thank you.
Dr. Sarcher.
Thank you. For innovation systems. Thank you. I've been working on innovation, formulating and analyzing innovation policy for about 14 years. If you look at Sweden right now, in February, we launched a process for designing a new national innovation strategy. On the government website, it'll say that Sweden is one of the last countries to formulate an innovation strategy, but that's actually not true. We formulated one 14 years ago when I started at the Ministry of Enterprise. It's just that nobody remembers it because it was so toothless. And I think that says a lot about the importance of political endorsement, and that's why the National Innovation Council in India will be really interesting to follow. The other thing about Sweden is that it's considered to be the country with the very first innovation agency. It was created in 2000, and it was the first one, I think, to be called an innovation agency, and that's Vinnova. And that has both good and bad sides. The good side is that we have a 10-year legacy now of being able to look at cluster programs, for example, with very mixed results, to be honest. The other one is that when you have an innovation agency, there is a tendency to point to the innovation agency and say they're responsible for innovation, and there is a big danger in that. So just a few thoughts about Sweden. We're here because everybody's talking about innovation. I'll skip this slide, but I think we have a lot of common challenges, and that's why it's really interesting to be here. And if you look at the last point, I think one of our principal challenges as people trying to stimulate innovation is time, which is that, it takes 10 years, for example, to see the results often of a cluster program. So it's extremely difficult to know when you're being successful with your innovation policy. And the global context, which is that we're often national policymakers, but we have to make sure that we're not hindering global connections, but that we're actually promoting them, which can be a problem with national funding rules. And then finally, resources. I think there's a lot to be said about the competency in policymaking for innovation policy. So Sweden, as you all know, it's an open country, it's an equal country, it's very wealthy, and it's considered to be among the most innovative in the world to a large degree because it has a very high percentage of R&D spending. But the question we're asking is if we're living off past successes. Our largest companies are on average 100 years old, which is a sign that they've been extremely successful in adapting to changing conditions. But it's also a question when companies like AstraZeneca, which a long time ago was Swedish, is closing down its R&D facilities in Sweden and moving them to India and China, then we need to think about what will happen when the large companies leave, or where will the new companies come from. The other thing is that the large companies in Sweden, like ABB, Ericsson, their success comes from investments in generic technologies about 30 to 40 years ago, from public procurement, from government. And so this is another question, what will this mean for the future? So what we're asking ourselves is who and what will drive innovation in the future? Where will the future knowledge, customers, and demands come from? And more fundamentally, how will Sweden, and I think Europe, remain attractive to companies and researchers? So when we ask ourselves who and what drives innovation, yesterday it was quite simple. This is the founder of Ericsson. But tomorrow, will it be the young Indians, or will it be the old Chinese? Or will it perhaps be the National People's Congress or the Standing Committee in China, which has made a huge investment in innovation procurement? And so the question comes to, what's Sweden doing to ensure its future innovative strength? So as I said, we kickstarted an innovation strategy in February. This is the former Minister of Enterprise, who should have been here, but she actually stepped down, and we have a new minister. But this process was started in February of this year. These are issues that we're working with, which have been mentioned by many other speakers before, so I will skip them. The importance of teamwork and collaboration. Perhaps just a few words about, in Sweden, the hype was the triple helix, which I think you all know, interaction between university, industry, and public sector. We're now moving to the concept of a knowledge triangle, which is the combination of innovation, research, and education. But above all, we feel that we need to improve the utilization of academic research. We produce a lot of research, but we're not utilizing it fully. We need to work on new collaboration schemes, and we need to involve new actors such as students. We think we've been focusing a little bit too much on star scientists and high-tech startups, and too little on other actors of the innovation system. We're working with innovation procurement, the same as many other countries. We're looking at test sites and demonstration facilities. And one of the key elements of our new strategy is what we call challenge-driven innovation. So Sweden traditionally is known for being a rather technology push-oriented country, and we're now focusing a lot more on the challenges, using them as a point of departure. And we just had a call where instead of promoting a technology, we just said, what can you do for sustainable urban development? And we didn't limit it to any sector or technology. The final thing is, I think one of the things we're learning, having been around with innovation funding for about 10 years, is that we need to constantly test new ways, but one of the key challenges is also to end in unsuccessful initiatives, and that's not always the easiest. Finally, when it comes to international connections, I chair an internationalization task force under the European Association of Innovation Agencies, and in that context, we just presented a report which we had commissioned, which looks at innovation in India, and which was presented in Brussels last week, because we're realizing that we need to understand a lot more about the drivers of innovation here in order to be able to